Welcome to Take It from the Ironwoman. My name is Susanne Müller, your host and the Ironwoman. This podcast is about empowering yourself and others to make real changes in the world. You will hear from everyday, smart, sophisticated, hip people like you and me. Not everybody has to be an Ironwoman to impress the world. Together, we will learn from the sports and business leaders how you can become a more successful person as an entrepreneur or a leader. It's one step at a time, one day at a time. Take your steps now. Take your big steps now. Join me on this journey to success. Take it from the Ironwoman. We only have special guests, and today my honor to have Christi Cassidy with us. She's this super podcaster. I've never met her in person. We meet each other probably once a month on our super podcasting fire chats or whatever they call. But Christi is the host and producer of Moving Along, a podcast in which her passion for travel comes together with the theme of relocation and life transitions. Welcome, Christi. Maybe give us some other things that you're doing.
Thank you, Suzanne. It's really nice to be here. That was a lovely introduction. I am indeed the host and producer of Moving Along, and generally, I think of myself as a rather passionate listener. I love radio. I love podcasts. I don't listen to too many audiobooks. Mostly, I try to hear other people's stories. Recently, I realized that that's what ties together so much of what I do, because I work as a publicist and I work with all kinds of people, not just authors, work for Publishers Weekly in the book publishing industry as a brand licensing director and as Publishers Weekly's publicist. I also am a freelance editor. I've done this for I realize more than 30 years. And I work on books. I edit books. I edit fiction and nonfiction and some poetry, not too much. And I have done children's books, but rarely. Children's books are very specialized. I love helping people promote their own stuff, themselves and their books, their products, their brand. But it's this ability, I believe I have to recognize the story, is to find the lead, to recognize the arc of the story, to figure out what belongs and what doesn't belong in the story. Pretty much. So whether I'm editing a book or whether I'm writing a press release or whether I'm trying to figure out an ad campaign or an email campaign to promote a brand or a product, everybody likes stories, kind of figuring out what that story might be. It's fun. It's fun.
It seems like we meet each other once a month. And now that I'm listening to your story, there's so much to unpack. Obviously, when we only meet 1 hour, we have maybe 4, 5, 6 people there. So not everybody gets to talk as much. It seems like in that 1-2 minutes that I'm listening to your story, you're such an interesting person and moving along and listening and the arc of the stories. How did it all happen to you?
Okay, so this is a good example of where do I begin?
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with Moving Along, because when I first started doing the podcasting workshop at Akimbo, it was also during the pandemic. I didn't know what I was doing there. All I knew was that I like to listen. I thought, well, maybe it'd be fun to see what is it like to try to produce something, a podcast in this case. I learned very fast what was absolutely not worth pursuing because I would be bored. So when you think about, well, what do you want to talk about? What do you want your podcast to be about? I thought, well, what do I love more than anything? I love to travel, and even just not going very far, even just a quick jaunt out over to Maine or wherever. I thought other people's stories of travel are pretty interesting. And also the relocation thing, which led me to the notion of life transitions, because I'm interested in people who take risks. Anytime you get in a car, you get on a plane, you are taking a level of a risk to go explore something or a place you've never been before. Relocation is part of my own experience, having lived most of my life in New York City, in Manhattan, and then taking a buyout on a rent-stabilized apartment and trying to figure out, we've decided, well, we're just going to go to New Jersey or Long Island like everybody else, or let's go someplace pretty. My partner and I narrowed it down to Portland, Maine and Santa Fe, New Mexico. And we visited both and we decided to go to Santa Fe because of the outdoors. I barely traveled west of the Mississippi, let alone live there, but it was quite an experience. And we lived there for about 15 years and then decided to come back because most of my clients are still in New York and my heart is in New York in many ways. Here we are back east and I live in Hudson, which is 2 hours due north of Manhattan, right on the Hudson River. It's much less, if you're in college and moving to the big city, everybody does that. But it's another thing to talk to people. Like I have friends in Santa Fe who up and moved to Hawaii. Okay. Like they're from Kansas. Okay. Kansas to Santa Fe. They were there for maybe 20 years. They moved with 3 suitcases, a duffel bag and their car. That was it. They went to Hawaii. And to me, that's a risk that a lot of people would be too afraid to take. And that's what I'm curious. What about you? What about you? What about you? What's your story? That's pretty much where I'm at now.
That's cool. We have more in common than we think. I relocated to New York City from Switzerland and at a young age, and I was working for the airline. So this was a little different. They transported most of my goods to New York. But moving, first of all, I always say moving is moving. It's emotionally moving also. And what I'm always impressed is by Americans moving like you from New York to New Mexico. Let's try new things. In Europe, people don't do that so much. Maybe it's not so easy to go from one country to other if you look at the geography. But in the US, it's still the same country. You can move, take your belongings, you rent the U-Haul and you go to New Mexico. And then these days you can work from anywhere. But then to go to Hawaii, I still think every place is a different culture, because if you come from New York, you go to New Mexico, it's a different pace. Isn't that a fair assumption?
Yes, it was definitely a different pace. And we met a lot of different kinds of people there, actually. We met New Yorkers, we met Californians, we met Texans, we met the old families who've been in Santa Fe for 600 years. We were very lucky. We lived right in this kind of melting pot of a neighborhood near downtown when we got there. And we met young families. We met older retirees. And a lot of these people are still our friends, which is great. It is a different pace. And I learned a lot about Native culture that I had I'm not going to say I had no interest in it, but it wasn't real to me in a way. Even growing up upstate in Iroquois country, the Southwest is very different. And I learned things like I love to hike in the mountains. I didn't know that. Me, a New Yorker who walks everywhere, but the idea of hiking in mountains was very foreign.
Interesting to listen to you when I think of my moving from Switzerland to New York. It's like you want to come to a city, but then after a while, I was craving nature. It's kind of like the reverse, because I was so used to hiking every weekend. I love the city, don't get me wrong, but then sometimes you crave nature.
Now, what do? Do you go out? Do you take weekend jaunts? Do you do getaways, or do you just go up to Central Park?
Central Park is my second home. I'm a runner. Obviously, I've done many New York City Marathon, 15 actually. And I've done the Toughman, Ironman, that's up a little further outside. So it is possible to get nature. You cross the George Washington Bridge and then you're almost in nature. It's possible, but you need to find the time and also the people to go along.
Your community.
Once you're in that running community, find your community in a good way, in a healthy way, in a different addiction.
I love Switzerland. It's actually one of my favorite places. It's so beautiful there. That was one of the first real international trips I took. I was in my late 20s, early 30s. I went with a partner whose company was based there. She had a reason to go back and forth, and I got to come along. It was amazing. It was amazing. And so probably I went 3 or maybe 4 times. And every section of Switzerland is so different. I thought the French section was just the best. And then I got to the Italian part. I was like, woohoo, wait a second. We can relax even more. And then my only time in Zurich, I was by myself and I got there on a train on a Sunday. Oh, being a New Yorker, I didn't realize everything would be closed. I didn't know what to do with myself. But I love Switzerland. The Alps are just so beautiful. I'll never forget those trips.
You have to go back because Sundays are now also a little more bustling than a few years ago. They have not all the stores are open, but some of the stores are open. I just came back from a trip, so it has changed quite a bit.
Ah, that's funny. It's been a long time since I've been there. Where do you go? Where do you like to go most when you go back? Where your family is?
Where my family is. And this time I'm originally from Thun, from the Lake of Thun. And my mom said, let's travel, let's go northwest or whatever. And I said to her, it's so nice in the summer. Let's just stay local. And that was the best that you could do. Sometimes we think we need to venture out. And you mentioned that too. This time you just go to Maine. We don't have to go so far. We can also be happy maybe in a 1 or 2 hour trip rather than traveling 15 hours or something like that.
Yeah. It's true. It's very true. That's so nice that you get to hang out with your mom, and it's a totally different experience than discovering a new place.
Yeah, except this time I was actually very proud to say, let's do something I haven't done before. After so many years just going and seeing the same places, I now make the point, I want to see something different. And then my friends come along with me and they say, oh, this was so nice. We should do that more often. It's an interesting dynamic that is happening.
That's great. What a great thing to do, too. Say, no matter what, even if you go back to a place you love all the time, to do something different.
Yeah.
To see something different, a different museum or a different walk in the woods or a different shop or restaurant or cafe.
Because I was actually talking to one of my clients and she said if she wants to go for a trip, she uses the Chat GPT and puts in what are the best places to go. And I said to her, actually, if you put what are the best places, let's say New York or Switzerland, you go where everybody else is going. But if you do your own research, you can actually go to different places. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
That's really smart. Like, forget about what TripAdvisor and they all say. Forget it. Do your own research. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
So now going back to your podcast, give us some highlights of people that you have interviewed, or is it host on mic? You do your own?
I interview different people. I have found that very rewarding. I'll tell you one thing I've learned along the way, and that is I might think somebody has a story and I think I know what the story is, but in fact, I don't necessarily know what the story is. So I might have a few pieces of the story and I've already put it together the way it goes together, but in fact, it's different. That's one of the most fun things, talking to people. An example of that, though, I'll tell you, is my friend Tommy No is his name. Tommy is his American name. His Vietnamese name is Hai No. I knew that he sang in Vietnam. And I knew that he did they go town to town singing, and it's like opera, but he said it's actually like standards. It's not necessarily opera in the European sense. And they would go singing with a piano town to town to town like that. And his father did not want him to do this. Anyway, I had this whole story in my head that from going to be an opera singer, and then he comes to New York and he meets his life partner during what they play the operas. They do the operas on Saturday afternoons. They air them on the radio, and his partner, Eddie, that's what he did for his work, was to be the production manager to get those operas onto the radio, the Metropolitan Opera. Saturday afternoons. But there was this whole other piece of the story, like that Tommy's father was in the war working for the Americans as, I believe, a translator, and perhaps even more, then ended up going to prison. And then the Americans got him out and got the family out of Vietnam, out of Saigon. I had no idea. See, so I made up my own story about him, and it was only half right. I enjoyed that. That audio was a little hard because some people I interview, English is their second language. Mm-hmm. So it can be difficult. I know you've gone through the same thing. Recently, I interviewed Alex Howard, who's the editorial director of Lonely Planet. And this goes back to what you were just saying about doing your own research and finding your own offbeat destinations, not necessarily going along with the crowd. That's a big part of what Lonely Planet is about. And so that was really rewarding to talk with him and to hear what Lonely Planet is up to. They're doing offbeat destinations, these new guidebooks. Cool. Yeah, those are a couple of examples, very different.
Yeah,
people,
wow. Well, you have access to those people. And I love Lonely Planet. Whenever I was traveling, I would buy their books. And now you go online and everybody wants to go off the beaten path. Let's talk a little bit about your involvement in the podcast community, because that's how we gelled a little more with the once a month, or you even have an idea club. So tell us a little more, and who are those protagonists who are with us?
Yeah, well, let's see. Steve Hetherington runs the podcasting workshop now, which is a wonderful resource if people want to explore doing their own podcast. And you really make something during the podcasting workshop rather. And then the podcaster community is a wonderful cohort. There's a lot of people in there. Most of the people in there took the podcasting workshop at one time or another, but there's other people too who are podcasters. And so, yes, there's a monthly idea club that we do. It was a book club. We were reading Seth Godin's book, The Practice. We started that. That was the first year. Now it's been the Idea Club. The Idea Club is in its second year. Once a month, we get together and talk about, it could be anything. We've talked about technical issues. We've talked about big ideas.
I joined you once and I thought this was so refreshing just to meet people. And I think before we recorded, we also said, it's just amazing the people who come together because we have an interest and a passion that we want to share something with the world. So that's amazing. And I have to say, I met the most wonderful people in the podcasting world that I would have never met anywhere on this planet.
That's true. That's just what we were talking about. They're very generous. They listen. They'll give you feedback. They help you with the tech.
Yeah.
They help you with ideas. They give you ideas of who to talk to next. It's really, it's a very special community. You're right. And maybe because it still feels kind of outlaw. It doesn't feel totally taken over by just a couple of big companies. It feels like there's room for so many more voices.
I have one final question that I ask everybody. What do you do when you don't work or podcast? Is there anything else that we left out today?
Well, okay. I have the down market answer and the up market answer. The down market answer is I like watching TV. I'm just going to say it. I do.
Why not?
There's shows that I love. I love The Bear. I love about the restaurant business in Chicago. I like documentaries that I can stream on TV. And then on the other hand, I really like to read. I do like to read. Right now, I'm reading a book that's going to be out in April of 2025 called An Anthology of Rain, R-A-I-N, An Anthology of Rain, by the poet Phyllis Levin. It's Phyllis with an I, Phillis. Levin is her last name. She's an award-winning poet and a Guggenheim Fellow. She's really brilliant. Lives in New York. This is her 6th book of poetry. And one thing I've noticed in reading her all these years is that she is telling more and more stories through her poems, and these characters rise to the surface in a way that only a poet can do. But that's what I do. I either watching TV or I'm reading.
And what's wrong with watching TV? Because we can also find good things on TV, but obviously books, it's also my passion. It seems like you have a personal relationship with that author. It's even more special. So thank you so much, Christi, and safe travels wherever you go, and see you soon in New York. That would be fun.
Thanks, Suzanne. I hope so.
Take it from the Ironwoman. We have episodes every Monday. Come and join us. Learn from others. Listen to others. Learn how to lead with others. And Take It from the Ironwoman is the book Global Business Coaching with Sports Parallels. Like us, support us, and write a review on your preferred podcasting platform. See you next time. Bye-bye.